Now, the Supreme Court, in fact, has said that in the Bilkis Bano case, the Gujarat government was not competent to pass the order and that the exempt order should be cancelled immediately. Remember, the 11 rapists in the Bilkis Bano case had been given remission or were released prematurely on Independence Day last year. The Supreme Court has now said that the Gujarat government was not competent to pass this order and that the exemption order should be cancelled. Now, the Supreme Court, in fact, spoke about key points in the case. One, the maintainability of Bilkis Bano's case and the PILs. And they did say that, of course, Bilkis Bano's case is maintainable, while the Supreme Court did not answer on the PILs. In terms of the Gujarat government's competency, they have said that the government was not competent and that should have taken permission before granting remission. And in terms of the remission and whether it was in accordance with law, the Supreme Court has said that the exemption order should be cancelled. This is, of course, the latest details that we're tracking for you from the Supreme Court. Just to give you some details of the case itself, the release of the 11 convicts. They were guilty of raping Bilkis Bano and killing 7 of her family members in the Gujarat riots in 2002. Now, the 11 rapists, remember, were released prematurely on Independence Day last year under the state government's outdated remission policy of 1992, which now the Supreme Court holds that the Gujarat government was not competent to pass that particular remission. Now, the judges, a two-judge bench, with the justices B.V. Nagaratna and Ujjwal Bhuyan. In fact, last year they had reserved the verdict after 11-day hearing as well, and now they've said that the remission must be cancelled. Now, remember, Bilkis Bano was only 21 years old and 5 months pregnant, in fact, when the incident took place. 11 convicts who were granted remission under an obsolete law and then went on to receive a hero's welcome were garlanded and welcomed with open arms. Now, Shailesh Bhatt, one of the 11 convicts as well in a shocking incident who was involved in the gang rape and murder case, was seen on stage with the BJP MP Jaswant Singh Babur and MLA Shailesh Babur as well. These, of course, are the latest that we're tracking for you in this particular case. That was the context of the entire case. Remember, the 11 convicts are guilty of raping Bilkis Bano and killing 7 of her family members in the Gujarat riots in 2002. They were convicted, jailed, and then prematurely released by the Gujarat government. Now, the Supreme Court, in fact, is holding that the rights of women must be respected. They're also saying that the Maharashtra government can grant release, but the Gujarat government was not competent to grant release and that they should have taken permission before they did so. Now, in fact, the Supreme Court has said that this particular remission or the release of these 11 convicts must be cancelled. That's, of course, the latest that we're bringing for you from the Supreme Court. This is the big breaking coming in on the broadcast at this point. I have my colleague Rishika joining us with more details. Rishika, now big news coming in. The Supreme Court, in fact, has said that the exemption granted to the 11 rapists in the Bilkis Bano case has to be cancelled.
Well, I think the quashing of the Gujarat government decision is now imminent, even though the Supreme Court hasn't said that yet. The judgment is yet to be pronounced. But on the basis of the observations of Justice Nagaratna that my colleague Arvind is reporting on, he's in fact inside the courtroom at the moment, therefore unable to join us, it is imminent that Bilkis Bano's rapists will in fact go right back into jail. The Supreme Court has come down very heavily on its own judgment that was given by Justice Ajay Rastogi in May 2022 that in fact was the basis which allowed the government to release the convicts. They have said that this judgment was flawed. It was obtained by fraudulent means. The Supreme Court there, very interestingly coming down very heavily on its own judgment, criticizing the judgment that was given by Justice Ajay Rastogi on this very issue. So it's going to be very interesting to see what the final verdict is. But like I said, it is pretty imminent given the observations of Justice Nagaratna and the Supreme Court right now that Bilkis Bano's rapists will go back into jail. I just want to put this in context for the benefit of our viewers. The judgment that was given by Justice Ajay Rastogi in May 2022 was the one that allowed the convicts to move the plea for a premature release before the Gujarat government in the very first place. Now, remember, the Gujarat government had released Bilkis Bano's convicts on the 15th of August in last year, in fact, on the basis of an obsolete remission policy. That remission policy was actually something that was changed back in 2014 But on the basis of this judgment of the Supreme Court, that is what constituted the legal basis on the basis of which the Gujarat government actually released the rapist. Now, remember, there was a panel that was constituted, which in fact went ahead and called the rapist sanskari. The panel believed that the rapist had served, their time on account of good behavior, and calling them sanskari, they'd actually released them. These rapists, the 11 men who were guilty of raping Bilkis Bano and killing her family members in the 2002 Gujarat riots, then walked out of jail as free men to a hero's welcome. They were garlanded. They were seen sharing stage with several BJP MPs and MLAs. In fact, a BJP MP and MLA were, sharing a stage welcoming one of the convicts back. So it was an extremely shocking move by the Gujarat government. Now the Supreme Court, of course, coming down very heavily. Remember, there was an 11-day hearing that took place in October 2023. That hearing concluded. And today the Supreme Court, of course, while in fact listening to this matter, has come down very heavily on the 2022 judgment that was delivered by the Supreme Court, on the basis of which they were granted release. Also questioning the competency of the government, saying that this was a case that was heard and tried in the Maharashtra government, by the Maharashtra government, and therefore the Gujarat government is not even competent in order to be able to grant this release. So they have in fact, questioned the very basis and the grounds on the basis of which this release was secured. In fact, breaking news that is coming in right now is that the Supreme Court has cancelled the order of the Gujarat government to pardon the convicts. They've said that the Gujarat government is not the right government to take decisions. The questions, of course, that will be asked now is, will these men be put back in prison? How soon will that happen? Will they now seek a release from the Maharashtra government? All of those questions still need to be answered. We'll, of course, try and connect with our Supreme Court reporters. But this is the latest information that is coming in from inside the courtroom. The Supreme Court has cancelled the order of the Gujarat government to pardon the convicts. They have said that the Gujarat government is not the competent government to be able to take these decisions. This was a case that was heard, tried, and the sentence was pronounced in a Maharashtra court. So if anything, it's the Maharashtra government that has to take the decision.
Right, Rishika, the Supreme Court also has made some observations about the rights of women as well. What have they said about that?
Well, Justice Nagaratna, in fact, while beginning the hearing in the case, has said that, this also has to be looked at from a respect to women's point of view. Heinous crimes against women cannot be treated in the fashion that this particular case has been treated. And, people who have been found guilty, 11 men who have been found guilty. Remember, they've been tried, sentenced, and found guilty of, raping Bilkis Bano, killing her entire family while they were trying to escape in the 2002 Gujarat riots. They cannot be given immunity. These were the words of Justice Nagaratna, which is also, of course, very, very important to note. I want to also just add, on the basis of the information that is coming in from inside the courtroom, that the Supreme Court has cancelled its 2022 decision. Now, remember, it was on the basis of the 22 verdict that this release was sought. They have now cancelled that decision. In this Gujarat government, it was described as a proper government. It was also said that the policy of 1992 should be considered. So this is what the 2022 judgment had said, Aarti, on the basis of which the release was sought. These are the two things that were said in the 2022 judgment, which now the Supreme Court has cancelled. This is, of course, all information that is just coming in from the courtroom. Our colleague Arvind Gunasekar is reporting on the very latest from inside the courtroom, and we'll hopefully be joined by him. But this is, a huge development that is taking place, a big verdict by the Supreme Court, coming down heavily on its own judgment, cancelling an order of the Supreme Court that sort of formed the legal basis on the basis of which these 11 men walked out free. So really huge day for Bilkis Bano. It's a vindication for her. We'll, of course, try and connect with her as well for a reaction on, but a huge vindication for Bilkis Bano as her rapist, the 11 men responsible for killing a large number of members of her family will hopefully walk right back into jail.
Right, Rishika, in fact, like you said, the Supreme Court has come down heavily on its order in 2022. In fact, they've said that the judgment of May 13, 2022, which directed the Gujarat government to consider remission, is a nullity and was obtained by playing fraud on the court and by suppressing material facts as well.
Well, absolutely. It is unprecedented, and we'll hope for our Supreme Court reporters to be able to shed some more light on this. But Justice Nagaratna has said, as per what my colleague Arvind Gunasekar is reporting from inside the courtroom, that on the 13th of May 2022, the judgment had in fact refused to follow binding precedents, including the Constitution Bench judgment in a previous matter when it comes to the appropriate government for granting exemption. The Supreme Court rejected, therefore, this May 2022 decision in which the court had said that the Gujarat government has the power to decide on the exemptions and the exemption policy of 1992. So they have essentially cancelled, they've not just come out and criticized and come down heavily on their own judgment, but the Supreme Court has in fact cancelled a judgment that was delivered in 2022, which, like I said, formed the legal basis. What does the 2022 judgment say, Aarti? Let's just break it down for the benefit of our viewers. The 2022 decision by the Supreme Court had very clearly said that the Gujarat government has the power to decide the exemptions and the exemption policy of 1992, which allowed for the exemption for murder, rape, gang rape, is applied. This is what the 2022 judgment of the Supreme Court has essentially said. Today, the Supreme Court, in its wisdom, has not just criticized that judgment, but also cancelled it. So that essentially removes the entire legal basis, takes away the entire legal basis on which the Gujarat government had cited this 1992 policy, which, like I said, is obsolete, and had granted remission. So the court has said significant things in terms of A, the Gujarat government is not competent to have granted this release. B, the Supreme Court judgment of 2022 on the basis of which this release was granted was obtained by quote-unquote fraudulent means. And therefore the Supreme Court, reversing all of that, has now said that if at all, the Maharashtra government is the government that's competent to grant release, and this 2022 order, which formed the legal basis, no longer exists because the court has cancelled it.
Right. In fact, Rishika, the Justice Nagaratna, in fact, has come down on the government as well. He's questioned why the state government failed to file a review petition. He's in fact saying that the Supreme Court fails to understand why the state of Gujarat did not file a review petition, and that if a review petition was filed, then the ensuing litigation could have not occurred.
Well, absolutely. The Gujarat government could not have granted this remission order in the first place because they were not competent, is what the court has maintained. And like I said, they've ordered, this May 2022 judgment of the Supreme Court to be cancelled. They've also come out, in fact, Aarti, and made very scathing remarks against this particular judgment and said that it was obtained through fraudulent means and a suspension of fact. So the Gujarat government should have filed a plea seeking a review of the 2022 order, stating that they aren't a competent government. The judgment is still being read out. My colleagues Arvind Gunasekar and Ashish Bhargav, of course, are continuing to send us the very latest. But, the larger ramifications of this, like I said, are huge. Political ramifications of this are huge. Remember, this is a story that had raised several questions against the ruling BJP government in Gujarat as well.
Right. Right, absolutely, Rishika. Like you said, the fact that the state government had consulted a panel of BJP leaders and that the panel had called these convicts or rapists sanskari as well, and the fact that we had seen there were instances where some of these convicts were seen along with BJP leaders as well, these questions are expected to arise again.
Well, absolutely. Like I said, huge political ramifications for this story as well, given the fact that, the 11 convicts who were released were given a hero's welcome. We saw that they were garlanded. We saw one of the convicts sharing a stage with a BJP MP and a BJP MLA from Gujarat. Also, Aarti, important to note here when we're talking about the political ramifications, that remember there was a panel that was set up under the 1992 remission policy on the basis of which the release was sought. This panel also had a BJP leader who was a member of the panel. This was the panel that had called these 11 men sanskari. This was the panel that believed that they had secured good behavior and had served enough of a sentence and therefore were fit to walk out. The opposition had raised several questions in the clutch of petitions that the Supreme Court has heard challenging the release. Of course, Bilkis Bano is one of the petitioners, but as is the TMC and as are other senior independent journalists as well. So it's a clutch of petitions that the Supreme Court has heard back in October 2023, and now, of course, this verdict has been pronounced.
Right. Thank you, Rishika, for joining us and bringing us context in this particular story. I'm also being joined by my colleague Arvind, who was in fact in the courtroom as the verdict was being announced. Arvind, take us through now the court's observations. We're learning that the Supreme Court, in fact, has cancelled the remission order issued by the Gujarat state government.
हो भी ना सके और अगर नियमों में ये
Yeah, Aarti, in a landmark verdict today, Supreme Court has held that state of Gujarat was not the competent government in granting remission to the 11 convicts in the Bilkis Bano case. Supreme Court has held that it is the Maharashtra government which is the competent government which could have decided on the remission plea or the premature release application of all the 11 convicts, and state of Gujarat could not have exercised its power to remit or to order premature release of all the 11 convicts in the Bilkis Bano case. So this landmark judgment has been given by a bench headed by Justice Naharatna on a plea by Bilkis Bano and also several PLs that were also filed. So on the very first question, whether the plea that was filed by Bilkis Bano was maintainable or not, on that particular question today Supreme Court has held that a plea by Bilkis Bano is very much maintainable. That means that the Gujarat government had questioned the maintainability of the plea by Bilkis Bano, saying that Bilkis Bano cannot challenge the remission order because the order has been pronounced by the government of state government of Gujarat, and they had questioned the maintainability of both Bilkis Bano plea and also the plea that were filed by pleas that were filed by the PAL petitioners. So in this particular case, Supreme Court has held that the plea by Bilkis Bano is very much maintainable. She can challenge the premature release of all the 11 convicts. On the question of maintainability of the PAL petitioners, on which Supreme Court has held that they are not deciding the maintainability of the plea by the PAL petitioners, they are keeping it open because the maintainability of Bilkis Bano plea has been settled, and that's why they are not getting into the question of the maintainability of the plea by PAL petitioners. But the very important answer that has been given by Supreme Court today is that the state of Maharashtra is the competent government and state of Gujarat could not have ordered the premature release of all the 11 convicts. That's the first answer. Second very important answer, because the state of Gujarat decided on the remission plea based on a Supreme Court order dated 13 May 2022. On that very answer, Supreme Court has held that its earlier order dated 13 May 2022 that was given by then Judge Justice Ajay Rastogi. That particular order today Supreme Court has held that one of the convicts moved the Supreme Court with suppressing the facts, and that particular order was obtained through fraudulent means. So the May 2022 order that was given by the Supreme Court today has been held fraudulent, that was obtained through fraudulent means by the Supreme Court. So anything that has been done pursuant to that particular order dated 13 May 2022 has been held null and void. That means that the remission that has been granted by the Supreme Court, by the Gujarat government, has been quashed by the Supreme Court in a landmark verdict today. Aarti?
Right, Arvind, stay with us. I'm being joined by Amreen Zaidi, a journalist. Thank you for joining us this morning. We're talking about the Supreme Court's landmark decision where they've said that the Gujarat government's order to allow remission for these 11 convicts in the Bilkis Bano case has to be cancelled. They've in fact come down heavily on the government, also calling it abuse of power, Amreen.
This is a win not only for Bilkis Bano, but for every single woman of this country. After this verdict, I believe every woman, every girl, every young girl will feel protected, and it's a win for a woman. It's a women empowerment in a true sense, Nari Shakti that we talk about in the true sense, and we can, heave a sigh of relief. Okay, finally somebody is standing by us, somebody is protecting us, and somebody is up there who will punish the culprits, and nobody can just get away with it.
Right,
I feel. Yeah.
Amreen, in fact, Bilkis had to fight a very long fight to get to where she is now. In terms of fighting the Gujarat government's decision from last year, once they were released, and these men, in fact, had received warm welcomes and had been called sanskari as well. How do we avoid this sort of situation arising? It, of course, puts forward the question of the 1992 remission law as well.
Okay. So, see, these are all politics. These are all photo ops. These are all done under a garb of something else, right? Bilkis Bano, it took so many years for her to get justice, but that is how a judicial system is. You see so many of other cases also pending in the courts for so long. You see so many of our, even soldiers, as I'm an army wife, and I deal with it every day. So many of our soldiers also fight for cases for decades. At least Bilkis has got some closure.
Right.
some judgment, some justice in her favor, and things are not hanging there in the air.
Right, absolutely. Thank you for joining us, Amreen. Amreen there says that the belief in the judiciary has been restored by this case as well. I'm still joined by my colleague Arvind. Arvind, talking about the decision of the Gujarat government, like I just said, the Supreme Court called it abuse of power. They've also said that the state of Gujarat has acted in complicit with the convicts, and that was the fear in the first place which led them to transfer the trial out of state. Now they're saying the Maharashtra government is the one that can actually order the release.
Yeah, Aarti, Supreme Court has answered questions on maintainability and also which is the competent government in deciding the remission, and also whether the earlier order dated May 2022 was obtained through fraudulent means and suppression of facts, and also very importantly, if at all if the remission order is quashed, should the convicts be sent back to prison? That's the fourth question that the Supreme Court is currently answering, because the pronouncement of judgment is still underway. So for now, we have got answers for the first three questions. One, the petition that has been filed by Bilkis Bano is maintainable. That means that the petition is valid, that Supreme Court can hear the petition, and Supreme Court has heard the petition, and Supreme Court has answered the question. The second question is, which is the competent government that can decide on the remission of all these 11 convicts? Because if you remember, Aarti, the trial of this particular case was transferred from the state of Gujarat to the state of Maharashtra on the very premise that for a free and fair trial, the trial was transferred from state of Gujarat to Maharashtra based on a Supreme Court order. And that's why Supreme Court has held, when the case has been tried in the state of Maharashtra, it is the Maharashtra government which is the competent government that can decide on the remission, not the territorial jurisdiction where the crime has taken place. That means even though the crime has taken place in the state of Gujarat, but it is the state of Maharashtra that can decide on the remission, because the state of Maharashtra has tried this particular offence. And that's why Supreme Court has today held that the state of Gujarat could not have decided on the remission of all these 11 convicts. That's the second answer. The third answer is very much important, wherein Supreme Court has held that its earlier order dated May 13, 2022 has been obtained through fraudulent means, because that particular order that was given by then Judge Justice Rastogi, that order has asked the Gujarat government to decide on the remission plea of all these 11 convicts based on 1992 remission plea. And that's why Supreme Court has said that particular order that was given on 13 May 2022, that itself was obtained through fraudulent means and also suppression of facts. And that's why Supreme Court has said any decision that has been taken by the state of Gujarat based on that 13/5/2022 order is declared null and void. And that's why this very remission order that has been granted by state of Gujarat has been quashed by Supreme Court now. And also the fourth very important question, if the remission order is quashed, should the 11 convicts be sent back to prison? That's a delicate position according to Supreme Court itself, and Supreme Court is still pronouncing order on that very important question.
Absolutely. In fact, Arvind, like you said, that question requires some amount of balance, because the Supreme Court at this moment, is talking about how, rule of law was violated when this remission was ordered, and the fact that justice can only be restored by sending them back to prison. But also the arguments are being raised about how they should not be subjected to imprisonment again. So the question of rule of law over personal liberty is there, Arvind. That's sort of a balance that the Supreme Court will have to talk about.
Yeah, Aarti, that seems to be the notion on which Supreme Court in its judgment has said that this is a very tricky question, or this is a very delicate question on which Supreme Court has to answer. Because on one side, the personal liberty is there. On the second side, the rule of law has to be established. So today, Supreme Court is trying to balance both. One, upholding the personal liberty, and also on the same side, and also upholding the rule of law. So here, Supreme Court has said that the law is equal. Everyone is equal before law, however high or low someone is. And that's what Supreme Court is trying to say, that even though the personal liberty is something that the Supreme Court should uphold, but on the other hand side, the question of rule of law should also be reiterated and also be established. And that's why this very answer on this question, should the 11 convicts be sent back to prison, will be providing a very important answer to several questions that can be answered in the coming days also. So this answer, the answer that we are awaiting now, is a very important one. Even though when the order is said to be quashed, that the remission order is said to be quashed, should the Supreme Court hold the personal liberty above everything, above everything, and then still order that even though the order has been quashed, they can still be allowed to stay away from prison, or
Right.
whether they should be sent back to prison is something that Supreme Court will pronounce shortly.